Another week has come and gone, and it's time again for Bleach Saturdays. This week I will be sharing my thoughts on episode 15 titled Peace from Shadows. This episode drops on July 15th, which of course is Ichigo's birthday, and boy have Kubo and the anime staff cooked really hard for this episode. The story picks up from the end of the last episode, with the Quincy beginning their second invasion of the Soul Society, with the Serete having been completely transformed into the ice-covered Quincy City. This episode adapts material from chapters 547 to 551, which is roughly 5 chapters worth of manga material, which is more than what we had last week. So it's going to be interesting to analyze how the events flow within this episode, because last week there was a lot of dialogue with quite a few alterations and anime exclusive scenes, but this week we're going to be kicking right into the action. We have several points of discussion to look forward to, like HASCHWALTH confronting SHUNSUI, along with the intense battles involving BG9 and Baz-B, which are going to be taking the center stage for episode 15 it seems. Now the real treat of this episode is a 1-minute post-credit scene, which I'm going to be sharing my thoughts on towards the end of this video, so be sure to stick around for that. So without further delay, here are my thoughts on the new Bleach 1000 Year Blood War arc episode. Amazingly, before the opening we have this incredible scene of the Stern Ritter that we had seen from the recent trailer of Core 2, where they're all sat around a table similarly to the Espada. This of course is an anime exclusive scene that they have added, and we have the Stern Ritter Grandmaster sitting at the head of the table with several Stern Ritter getting some new lines of dialogue. Individuals like Robert, BG9, Asnod and Bambietta all have some lines here. Now during the scene the camera pans out to reveal the title card Peace from Shadows on the table. I love how creative the anime staff are with revealing the title cards for each individual episode. Now my favorite bit of this scene in particular is definitely seeing Nyanzol Weasel sitting there with that unbelievably weird facial expression. Now this scene involves a discussion where Robert repeats Yobak's order that the Stern Ritter who had stolen the Bankai from the captains are to kill their respective victims. BG9 questions whether if it's just going to be enough to send the sword out in order to deal with the Shinigami, because they have been weakened to such an extent now, but HASCHWALTH clarifies that their intention is to take the sense of hope away from the Shinigami. He speaks about how Yobak has predicted that the captains who had lost their Bankai will have compensated for their lack of power, because they most likely are learning to fight without their Bankai in the short period of time between the first and second invasion. He tells the Stern Ritter that they have hope that they can beat the Quincy without their Bankai, and even believing that they will be able to regain their stolen Bankai at some point. Now this is the hope that the Shinigami are clinging on to, and HASCHWALTH states that they must remove their hope and etch true defeat into their very beings, and this is the intention of Yhwach, which HASCHWALTH conveys to the other Stern Ritter who have all gathered. Asnod comments on how this is a very disturbing plan, which also sounds fun, and then we get Bambietta saying that she plans to kill the doggy that she had stolen the Bankai from, as well as anyone else who gets in her way. This amazing anime exclusive scene comes to an end when HASCHWALTH repeats Yobak's orders one more time. He states that Yobak has commanded them to instantly annihilate the enemy, and of course in such a dramatic manner we then cut to the opening song, truly setting the stage for the events of episode 15. The episode starts with events from the start of chapter 547 but slightly trimmed down, as we see the Serete engulfed in this dark red shadow. Ukitake's seated officers are seen telling their captain about the state of the Serete, but strangely Ukitake is within a shrine with his back turned to them as he is preoccupied with something very important. We then cut to head captain Shunsui as he states that he had set up some traps within the Serete, expecting the Quincy to attack again without warning, but out of all of the things he wasn't expecting them to lose the territorial advantage that they had like this. Yhwach's explanation of how the Quincy had hidden within the shadows of the Serete is slightly repurposed and told within the manga during a conversation between Yhwach and Uryu. In the manga, both of them were stood on top of Silburn looking over the landscape, but here Yhwach is seated and watching over everything with Uryu standing beside him. Yhwach explains that the Quincy had lost the battle 1,000 years ago and they were left with no place to go, so they had decided to flee from the world of the living into the Serete, which is a place that the Shinigami would have least expected to find them. The Quincy had ended up creating spaces by manipulating reishi within the shadows of the Serete. Now this is why Yhwach refers to his army as the Invisible Empire. Their plan of course was successful because unlike the world of the living, the Soul Society is filled with a plentiful supply of reishi. All of this reishi in the atmosphere is a source of power for the Quincy. Yhwach explains that with this abundant amount, they were literally able to create anything. We then see Askin appear as he formally is introduced as Stern Ritter D, the Death Dealing. I find this pretty awesome because his shrift letter was revealed a little bit later on in the manga. Askin of course tells the Shinigami within the research and development department that that the Quincy had spent 1,000 years building up their strength from the realm within the shadows. HASCHWALTH of course is then seen confronting SHUNSUI, telling him that the Quincy did not invade the Serite by breaking through the Serite barrier either in the first or second invasion. He states that they were always within the barrier from the very beginning. The head captain thanks him for the valuable information as he compliments HASCHWALTH, stating that he appears to be well trained if he was able to reach the room of the head captain this quickly. HASCHWALTH formally introduces himself as the aide of Yhwach and the Grand Master of all Sternritter, as SHUNSUI also introduces himself as the newly appointed head captain. But of course HASCHWALTH is already aware of this information, explaining that this is why he had come to see him in the first place. SHUNSUI calls him impatient and asks doesn't he want to enjoy the battle that the Quincy have waited over 1,000 years for, but HASCHWALTH reveals that Yhwach is a lover of peace. He believes that the shorter the battle the better it is, and it's for this reason that the leader had issued the Sternritter only one order, which of course is to eliminate the Shinigami instantly. We cut back to Askin with the members of Squad 12 asking who on earth he is and how did he get in here. Askin seems disappointed that they didn't listen to his explanation earlier, as he questions whether if the research and development department really is as smart as they believe themselves to be. He reiterates that the Quincy haven't broken into anywhere because they have been here from the very beginning. But then the goat himself, Mayuri, appears wearing an absolutely blinding sun coat, as he states that it was inconsiderate of the Quincy to create another world within the shadows, but he isn't the type to hate inconsiderate things. Mayuri goes on to speak about the data that he had collected from the Quincy's first invasion, and via this information he was able to predict that the shadows were related to their invasion, which is why he had modified the area within their lab in order to not have any shadows within it. He then taunts Askin to try and find out if his department really is only clever in just name. We are then shown a group of Shinigami who stand before Baz-B, but he fires a wave of flames towards them, telling them that the Quincy invasion is complete and that there is no need to resist it now. But then we have the epic introduction of Hitsugaya and Rangiku, who appear to have protected the Squad 10 Shinigami by creating a wall of ice, as they taunt Baz-B that his fire wasn't able to penetrate his ice wall. Baz-B of course recognizes Hitsugaya as the captain who had lost his Bankai to Kangdu. After they introduce themselves to each other, Baz-B states that they are quite a good match to fight against, with Hitsugaya's ice versus Baz-B's fire. Omaida is then shown as he wonders what on earth is going on. His younger sister is also revealed to be next to him, pleading with him not to go, but Omaida tells her that he has to go in order to protect the Serite and their family, reminding her that he is a member of the Gotei 13. But suddenly the Sternritter BG9 appears before them, as Omaida recognizes him as the Sternritter who had stolen the Bankai of Sifon. Before we cut to the midpoint of the episode, we get this amazing scene of Yhwach sat watching the Wandenreich city, along with Uryu standing next to him also observing the events that are unfolding. When we return, we see Rangiku tell the other Shinigami to fall back because her and Hitsugaya will take care of the Sternritter. Baz-B notes that the ice that Hitsugaya is creating is really thin, and he states that he can spread it as much as he wants to, but he will only end up effortlessly melting it with his flames. Before Rangiku turns up, there is this really nice anime exclusive scene that we have seen from the trailers of Core 2, where Baz-B is firing a flaming fist towards Hitsugaya, who only ends up avoiding the attack as he goes to higher ground. Now this of course continues with the events from the manga, where Rangiku informs Hitsugaya that the Shinigami from Squad 10 have fallen back, as Hitsugaya accepts help from Rangiku here. I love the fact that they didn't cut this scene from the anime, because a lot of these brief comedic moments like this are overlooked, but I really like that they have kept this in, as I believe that it fleshes out the dynamic between Rangiku and Hitsugaya. Rangiku then unleashes her Shikai, which she fuses with Hitsugaya's ice. Baz-B struggles to melt the ice, as Hitsugaya explains that the ice is a multi-layered wall of vacuum ice. The multiple layers of ice have been created by Rangiku's Zanpakuto combined by Hitsugaya's, as multiple thin layers of air have been created into several layers of ice. Thus combining Rangiku and Hitsugaya's powers, they were able to create a multi-layered wall of vacuum ice. Hitsugaya explains that his Shikai and Bankai are quite similar, and the only difference between them is the amount of ice that can be produced in each form. The amount of ice created by his Shikai is drastically reduced twist. He reveals that in the time since the Quincy had attacked, he had been training to fight with less ice, which appears to have been enough to be able to successfully block the flames of Baz-B. But the Stern Ritter then fires a blast of flames towards him, but it once again fails to penetrate through the vacuum ice wall. Hitsugaya of course then ends up counter-attacking by blasting him with his own Shikai. With Baz-B now sealed within a wall of ice, Rangiku says that it appears as though the Stern Ritter can be beaten without having to resort to using Bankai. We then cut back to HASCHWALTH and SHUNSUI speaking, as Nanao has created a barrier called Ultimate White Wall, which blocks HASCHWALTH's power and prevents him from entering. She explains that this is a barrier that temporarily is able to shut out any Quincy powers. We then cut back to Omaida being attacked by BG9. Now this entire sequence is really different to how things unfold within the manga, because most importantly, during this scene in the anime, his sister is still with him, and it also includes some additional scenes here which portray Omaida in more of a heroic manner. BG9 asks him where his captain is, as he states that this is the third time that he is asking him, and he wants an answer this time round, as BG9 tells him that he cannot find Sifon after searching the area with his spiritual pressure samples, which he had acquired from the first invasion. He wasn't even able to find her after extending his search outside of the Serite. Omaida frustratingly says that he doesn't know where she is. BG9 then accepts that he has refused for the third time to tell him, as he aims his tendril towards his younger sister to impale her, but Omaida intercepts the attack. Now this is very different from the manga, as he ends up protecting her, as it's all in line with the anime staff trying to make Omaida appear to be a bit more heroic in the anime version. I'm assuming that this was a change that was recommended by Kubo, because to be honest, in the manga, Omaida just is his usual pathetic self here. Now after protecting his sister, BG9 reveals his Reishi minigun and he fires it towards Omaida, but then Sifon finally appears onto the battlefield, saying that she is surprised because she would have expected a Quincy to use a bow and arrow instead of this sophisticated gun, which she has destroyed and she is holding a portion of in her hand. Now I absolutely love this shot of Sifon, which is adapted with this deep red background and her infinite Shunko flowing behind her. BG9 of course is surprised because he didn't sense Sifon, but Sifon explains that cloaking her spiritual pressure is to be expected from the leader of the stealth division. BG9 knows exactly who she is and what titles she holds, but he is surprised by her appearance. Sifon explains that this is her Shunko. Once again, BG9 is aware of this, as he explains that this is the highest form of Hakuda combat art, and it's done by applying Kido onto your back and shoulders. He assumes that her Shunko must still be unperfected at this point, but it's evident from Sifon's display of power that she has perfected a Shunko now. She then quickly appears in front of BG9 and unleashes her infinite Shunko, which causes a devastating blast to echo through the Quincy city. Following Shunsui's attack, we cut to material from the beginning of chapter 550, where Askin is seen speaking with Mayuri again. The Stern Ritter gets a feeling that it will take too long to eliminate Mayuri, stating that there are too many possible scenarios for him to test out against the Shinigami. Askin says that he is the type of person to enjoy rushing one fight to the next, preferring not to get too hung up on little details, as he suggests that Mayuri go look for somebody else to fight. As he is walking away, he asks if Mayuri is going to stop him, but the Shinigami says that before he gets closer and steps into his territory, he wants to analyze his spiritual pressure first. Askin is surprised that Mayuri had seen through his taunts, and he is glad that he hasn't revealed his ability to him just yet. Of course, it's evident that Askin's power has something to do with altering the space around him. Mayuri then senses that Sifon was supposedly able to defeat her opponent without using Bankai. Askin goes on to say that Yuobak had predicted that the captains who had lost their Bankai would learn how to fight without them in the short amount of time that they had. He then says that this was already accounted for by the Stern Ritter, and taking this into consideration, the situation for the Shinigami has just become a lot more critical. Hitsugaya of course notices the blast, as Rengiku says that things are looking good, as she suggests that they go and help some other captains. But behind them, Baz-B is revealed to have survived, as he states that they are only warming up, and the fight is just getting started. Baz-B melts his way out of the ice vacuum. Now Baz-B has some anime exclusive lines here, where he tells Hitsugaya that he only needs one finger in order to defeat him, and even if he had his Bankai at this very moment in time, then he would have been able to defeat the ice of his Bankai with a single finger too. Hitsugaya fires a wave of ice towards him, but it is so thin that it doesn't reach him. He then tries to fall back with Rangiku after he creates an ice wall, but Baz-B uses Burner Finger 1, which directly fires through Hitsugaya's chest. We of course then cut back to Sifon as she avoids an attack from BG9, who has recovered from the infinite Shunko attack. She then grabs his tendril and slams it into several buildings, telling him that she is surprised that he is still breathing, but BG9 says that he was never breathing in the first place. The Stern Ritter then opens up some of the armored plates on his body, revealing multiple projectiles, as he tells her that at her current level there is no need to use a Bankai against her. He then goes on to say that he was disappointed by her infinite Shunko as he fires projectiles at her. She avoids them but ends up being impaled through her wrist by one of BG9's tendrils. Then at this close range, Sifon is attacked by one of his projectiles. With the explosion erupting from Sifon's battle, we cut back to SHUNSUI, Nanao and HASCHWALTH. The Stern Ritter Grandmaster asks if the other captains are able to use the technique which Nanao is using, but she nervously says no. He states to them that she should have taught the others this technique because maybe then they could have died while putting up a fight instead of this brutal one-sided execution. We then cut to Hitsugaya evading Baz-B, with the Stern Ritter questioning why he is running away, and it isn't becoming of a captain to be behaving like this. He then fires his ice once more towards Baz-B, but he melts it. But this time he ends up being surrounded by a mist of ice which he also effortlessly melts. The Stern Ritter is frankly tired of his little tricks, but Hitsugaya says that he has come up with a plan, revealing that he has set up a trap as he activates his technique 6-point ice formation, which encases Baz-B into a tall tower of ice. But the Stern Ritter easily breaks free, much to Hitsugaya's shock. He then reminds him that he only needed one finger in order to defeat him. He then asks if he wants to make him mad enough to use 2 fingers, as he then activates his technique Burner Finger 2, which breaks Hitsugaya's Zanpakuto and literally brings the captain down to his knees. This intense battle is interrupted by Kangdu, who appears and tells Baz-B that this is enough, because Yuobak had ordered the Quincy, who had stolen the captain's Bankai, to be responsible for delivering the final blow. Kangdu of course has appeared in order to end Hitsugaya's life. Meanwhile, we cut back to Mayuri at the research and development department, who is alerted that the spiritual pressures of Sifon and Hitsugaya can no longer be detected. But then Mayuri disappointingly asks himself if he is the only captain who is able to fight without a Bankai. But he then gets an urgent call from Urahara, who informs him that he has figured out a way to regain the stolen Bankai. Now this is where episode 15 ends, but there is a phenomenal post-credit scene which is a minute long, and it reveals a poem that is said by Ichigo, and it's during the entire sequence of Ichigo training. Now during this post-credit scene, we catch back up with Ichigo during his training with Ichigo, and he's seen walking down the strange realm that he has been taken to. This realm of course can only be entered with the permission of the Soul King we had learnt in the last episode. In the background of this scene, Ichigo is in fact saying a poem, and this is what he says in the poem. It begins but does not end. Names wither in the silence, in an abyss of rolling clouds. Raindrops fill an empty vessel. Those who are unworthy to be a vessel succumb to its weight, and it turns to stone. It breaks apart and turns to gravel. Pounding rain reduces it to dust. For such a vessel there is no way out. Following this verse of the poem, Ichigo is then seen losing his balance as he feels a heavy force upon him. He then questions what is this heaviness that he is feeling, and of course if you link it back to the poem that Ichigo was just saying, Ichigo is in fact the empty vessel that is currently being filled with raindrops. He is now being tested whether if he is a worthy vessel to become the next Soul King, I'm guessing. As he is being filled with raindrops or pressure here, he's being tested whether if he is going to succumb to its weight and end up transforming to stone. The worst case scenario is during this test to see if he is a worthy candidate for the Soul King, if he cannot sustain the weight, then he'll break apart and turn to gravel, be transformed to stone and then reduced to dust after the pounding of the rain. Ichigo states that for a vessel that is not worthy in a way, there is no way out. Now the poem continues with the final verse, as he says, "But if one does not enter, there is no path. Those who are about to perish call it IRAZUSANDO." Now a lot of people are speculating if IRAZUSANDO is the actual name of the Soul King, but others have said IRAZUSANDO is the path that Ichigo is currently walking down right now, as he is facing this shrine. Maybe the process of testing to see if Ichigo is fit to be the next Soul King vessel is called IRAZUSANDO. Of course, a lot of this leaves us with way more questions than answers, and I'm going to have a bit more of a detailed breakdown about this post-credit scene in my manga versus anime analysis video tomorrow. But be sure to let me know your thoughts about what this post-credit scene means and what Ichigo's poem means. Do you agree with me that it's about Ichigo being tested as a vessel, or could it be referring to something entirely different? Now this was an episode that managed to take what has already been an extremely strong visual foundation which was established in episode 14 and build upon it even further. This episode featured what I personally believe to be be the best art consistency that we've ever gotten in the Bleach anime. It is full of well-detailed characters who almost 95% of the time remain on model, and I think that we have no one else to thank for these extremely strong drawings than our chief animation director for this episode, Michio Hasegawa. And it's not just the art that's phenomenal in this episode, but also the visuals. Director Taguchi is best known for how much he loves to play with colors and his emphasis on compositing, and today we got what I might call the most Taguchi episode ever. The compositing for the scenes were absolutely phenomenal, with multiple scenes being shaded under different colors that give the episode an amount of visual wealth that it has no right to have. This is also the first time that we see the red sky being put to the test, and I'm going to have to be honest, it works really well. So much so that I feel all the worrying might have been for nothing. My favorite shot for this episode will definitely have to be the background shot of Uryu and HASCHWALTH standing before an opening where the red sky is in full view along with the Quincy cityscape, because this scene just looks absolutely amazing. My second favorite shot was from Hitsugaya's battle against Baz-B, which brings us to the animation. The animation in this episode is fine, I would say. I wouldn't call it amazing, especially on the character animation side of things, but what works incredibly well is the effect animation. We can only attribute this to the absolute legend who was the action and effects animator for this episode, Takashi Hashimoto. The episode may not have necessarily had some insane bursts of animation, although there were some beautifully made cuts here and there, but the gorgeous effects were paired with the phenomenal visuals, which leads to the shot that I mentioned from Toshiro vs Baz-B. This is from the cut where Baz-B uses Burner Finger 1 and it clashes with Hitsugaya's ice wall. The beauty of this scene is best found in how Hitsugaya and Baz-B's powers visually interact, with Baz-B's flames piercing through Hitsugaya's ice wall, and of course we get this gorgeous shot of the flames making contact with Hitsugaya, as well as the colors of his flames are reflected all over the ice, which in my opinion the anime does such a better job in comparison to the manga of conveying. All in all, this was a visually strong episode with equally strong effects and animation, as well as overall okay character animation. I can't wait until we start to reach the more hype moments of this second core, because there are so many more moments that I'm looking forward to seeing adapted by Taguchi and the team. Episode 15 was absolutely phenomenal. We had so much material swapped around from the manga, with the sequence of events being improved upon, I believe, in the anime. Unnecessary material was cut down, and we had some heroic Omaida scenes, as well as HASCHWALTH speaking with the Stern Ritter during an anime exclusive scene at the start of the episode, and not to mention the jaw-dropping post-credit scene that we had, which possibly reveals the true name of the Soul King or the name of the path that Ichigo is currently walking down. Now, episode 16 is titled The Fundamental Virulence, and it continues on from the end of chapter 551, adapting more of the second invasion of the Quincy. This episode has certainly left us with a lot more questions than answers, especially following that 1-minute post-credit scene where Ichigo was reading that poem from these scrolls, and Ichigo was walking down that path, which was just unsettling to say the least. The post-credit scene basically opens with Ichigo still in the secret shrine that Ichigo had brought him to in episode 14. We see Ichigo walk in this strange room, and it appears as though he's struggling to walk in that atmosphere. All of this happens while Ichigo runs very eerie commentary in the background, and if you want to hear my thoughts on this scene in particular, then I'd recommend that you watch my manga versus anime comparison video, which I'm going to be dropping tomorrow. In that video, I'll offer more of a comprehensive deep dive into this new scene, as well as each of the differences between the anime and the manga in much greater detail. So definitely subscribe and stay tuned for my video tomorrow. In the meantime, let me know your thoughts on episode 15 of the 1000 Year Blood War arc anime. Did you enjoy the battles between Hitsugaya and Baz-B, Omaida being heroic, or Sifon's return and HASCHWALTH confronting Shunsui? I cannot wait to read all of your thoughts on episode 15 of the 1000 Year Blood War arc anime. And lastly, thanks for making it to the end of this video, and be sure to come back tomorrow for my all new video comparing the manga to the anime, of course. If you enjoy my content, then you can support my channel through Patreon for as little as $1 a month, or even through YouTube by becoming a channel member. You will gain access to exclusive channel perks and a Discord server which I frequently use. So become a member of my Zero Division and be the first to know about my upcoming videos. And once again, thank you for sticking around till the end of the video, and whatever you contribute will mean a lot to me.